insulated metal water bottle. If I looked at the search term like women's pink rubber coated insulated water bottle, like that's my exact product. Now, the more specific you get to the product, the more specific the search is, the lower your search volume is going to be. So what we always look to do on product launches is like we try and find the intersection between good search volume, and good to us is like maybe even a couple thousand depending on the budget, that also have really good relevancy to the product. Because what you're trying to do is you want to get in front of your exact shoppers. So example would be insulated water bottle is going to be really expensive and not super specific to my product. Like it's kind of specific, but not really specific. I'm trying to say like, okay, where can I start getting super specific to my product, but it's going to have enough search volume that I can get the sales volume that I need. So I would focus more on that versus that I would looking at only search volume. A bit of a technical answer here is we don't quote move them, meaning we're not going to pause the existing keywords. We're simply going to launch them in another match type. Again, make sure to keep the bids lower. Amazon actually, if you read their recommendations, they recommend keeping bids lower on broad and phrase match, even lower than the exact match. When we would launch those is honestly really dependent performance of the account and availability of the budget. So if you launch a keyword in exact phrase and broad, so you have 50 keywords, right? And you launch them in exact phrase and broad, you technically have, 150 keywords that you've launched. And the potential of broad and phrase to spend could be quite high. So again, you just want to make sure it makes sense. It seems super simplistic, but if you are in a phase where you're struggling to control total ACoS and ACoS, to fix those two numbers, it really means that you have to lower down your ad spend with ideally little to no impact of the total sales or the ad sales in the case of ACoS. If you introduce a whole, again, those 50 keywords in exact phrase and broad, and those you probably need to test and optimize the bids, etc., you're introducing a lot of additional ad spend into the account. So you do want to be aware of that and be careful with that. So that's kind of a benchmark that we use. But overall, I would say, I don't know if I would have like a certain time frame or a frame which I would hold back on. It really is dependent on the performance of the account. Another good question, which best bid strategy for phrase and exacts when you move? So again, we don't really move them. We would simply launch them in addition. We like to separate them by campaign as well. Kind of gives us a little bit more control over, say, budgets for things. Now, as far as the bidding strategy, we're a super huge fan of using mainly dynamic down only. If it is a keyword that we want to ensure that we get impressions for, so for our launch keywords, for our main keywords, for anything we're trying to be aggressive with, we prefer a fixed bidding strategy. It's still going to be the same. It's still going to be pick highly relevant keywords. One other tip is pick keywords that fit within the budget of the account that you're launching. So for instance, if I have a couple $100 a day budget versus $50 a day budget, those launches are actually going to look a little bit different because I can't afford that many clicks on a $50 a day budget. Or if I had, a couple $100 or $1,000, I have a lot more room for clicks. So actually, you want budgets to play into your launch strategy. The other thing that you want to keep in mind, do not expect profitability on launch. This is a huge one. There's a lot of people that try and pull back and knee-jerk for profitability right out of the gate. That is not going to happen. The reason why it's not going to happen, and I'll tell you the numbers behind the numbers, is that ACoS is just going to be high on your product launches, and that is a function of two things. One, the aggressive cost per click you have to set to be able to get visibility in the beginning, and two, how low your product conversion rate is going to be, especially if you're launching without reviews. Those two things, once you start to be able to bring your cost per clicks down because you gain momentum or you're optimizing your bids, and then two, once your product conversion rate starts to increase because you're getting those reviews, maybe you're optimizing your listing a little bit more because you've learned more about your target market, that is going to help bring down your target ACoS. So those things, again, conversion rates are going to be low, high cost per clicks. That's actually like the nuts and bolts of why your ads are not profitable, and it's almost unreasonable to expect profitability in the beginning. And that's actually why, if you've ever had a product where you're like, no matter what I do, I cannot seem to bring the ACoS down, struggling here, it's a function of that your conversion rate is remaining low and it's not improving, and your cost per clicks are remaining high and you're not able to improve them due to the market or something else. So again, I would still say pick highly relevant keywords, Also, make sure that whatever keywords that you have fits within your budget. Launch them. Aggressive, sponsored product, exact match, potentially sponsored brand video, exact match if you have the creative. Double down on that for a couple weeks and then start expanding. Hello, and welcome back to another Ask Junglr segment. This is the time every single week on Thursdays, 12 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, while I show up. Hey, my name is Elizabeth Greene, co-founder of Junglr, and I am here to answer your Amazon advertising questions for an entire hour. Say it every week, my favorite hour of the week, because I just get to jam out on Amazon ad strategy. So appreciate it. Already see some questions in the chat. So we're going to get to those ASAP. If you can hear me and you can see me, great. Type something in the chat. Let us know where you are listening in from. And we'll get started. Again, if this is your first time, then format for this, as you guessed it, type an Amazon ad question into the chat on whatever streaming platform you are listening in from. I will get it, and I'll make sure to get you a specific answer. That's why these Q&A segments are so powerful, because there's best practices, and then there's what is best in your specific scenario. And what I find is that if you completely ignore how your account is doing, the factors that are contributing to kind of where you're at right now, and you just go, oh, this is the way to do it, oftentimes you end up doing more harm than good. I've been doing a lot. I mean, we've been doing Amazon ad audits for a really long time, over 6 years now. So I've seen a lot of accounts. I've seen a lot of scenarios. I've seen a lot of things that work, and I've seen a lot of things that haven't worked. And consistently, as we sort of ramp up and we're doing more and more of these audits these days, it's really been a misalignment of tactics with what needs to happen in the account and the strategy. So what I'm seeing more and more these days, as Amazon advertising gets, let's be honest, really competitive. It has to do with more ad spots on the page. It has to do with the increase in cost per clicks. It has to do with more and more brands focusing on ad impact on their total account and ranking, which means that they're willing to pay a little bit more for those ad spots, which means cost per clicks are rising. That's kind of any ad platform, honestly, is that cost per clicks just continuously go up. We had a couple times where they dipped a little bit, which was a nice relief. But they've been on the rise, which means you need a better strategy to figure out how to play the game. You need to understand the game, and that's going to lead you to the correct answers and how to play it. So that's my goal with this hour today. I'm going to tell you how to play the game. I'm going to tell you how to move within your account to, kind of really help achieve the goals that you're looking for. And also, if you are listening in here and you haven't explored, by the way, we're doing this every single week, which means we've got a heck of a ton of content and a lot of information on, again, how to run a better strategy. So I would go over to junglr.com/live. We're going live here right now. But you're also going to see some resources as to, getting notifications for when we go live. We're actually putting this out in a podcast format, which means that you can listen in on whatever platform makes sense for you. Of course, you can always check replays on the platform. So without further ado, I'm going to pull a question up on screen. Although we actually have another guest today, Ryan Kramer is joining me.
Hey, everyone.
I'm gonna put. He's been backstage. I'll pull him up on stage. Sorry, I didn't warn you, Ryan. He's been helping us out with just connecting with others in the Amazon community. And also Ryan's been working with a lot of different sellers on different things like inventory, funding, all kinds of things. So if we get any interesting questions, Ryan, maybe you can help me out with them. But first question, again, if you got an Amazon ad question, type it in the chat. Let us know. We'll get you in the answer. This segment, the length will depend on how many questions we get as well. So if you got a question, make sure you ask. Joseph is asking, this was a really good strategy. A really good question. It's like, hey, what's the best way to go about a relaunch? For example, when an item was out of stock and you need to regain positions? This is a really good question because, and Joseph, by the way, I appreciate you showing up every week and asking these like super awesome questions. You can tell you're in the weeds. You can tell you're thinking intentionally about your account. And yeah, this is a really common occurrence because unfortunately, honestly, the name of the game on Amazon is first, second, and third rule, never run out of stock. We all know it. It happens, right? Sometimes it's completely unavoidable. And so really the struggle is if you have gone out of stock. I'm not saying you, Joseph, I know you're savvy, but a lot of times sellers will come in and they'll like just reactivate all the old campaigns and then be like, performance isn't what it was. I'm not getting back to where I was when I first ran through this. And that's not uncommon at all. So two reasons for that. One, depending on how long you've been out of stock, there could be market or like competitor shifts, meaning maybe everyone's applied coupons or maybe some people had lower price points, or depending on how much like long you were out of stock, maybe some competitors came in the space and they have a different USP. There's something that they've sort of taken up that momentum. Cost per click sometimes can go up. How much the market is shifted will also depend on how long you've been out of stock, right? If you've been out of stock months, there's a good chance market is like taking a very significant shift. Other things to keep in mind is if you have a seasonal product, right? So like maybe when you ran out of stock, you were peak season because you're selling like summer toys, and then you're now in fall where maybe people aren't outside as much and maybe they're not going to the beach as much due to like climate or just heat. Maybe it's too cold to go to the beach. So also keep those kind of things in mind as like seasonality of your products as well as market shifts, because that will also change, like say things like consumer behavior. Another thing that could have changed is the search traffic, right? So what searches are people using? Amazon suggested search, those things can change. So all of those things are like underlying factors as to why your ads aren't maybe quote working as good as they did before. Another factor would be sort of Amazon's confidence in your product in relation to those keywords. So in a lot of ways, like think of when you went out of stock and you were say maybe you were lowering your bids on things because you're trying not to run out of stock, right? Or whatever optimizations you've done before you ran out of stock, that's for like peak sales, right? You're no longer in that season. So think back to the playbook that you ran when you ranked the products, right? You identified your top terms, you made sure they were an exact match, you probably used a fixed bidding strategy, you went really aggressive with your bids to make sure you got more premium placement on those search pages. And again, what your bid needs to be to get that premium placement can shift over time. Unfortunately, typically always shifts to be increased and not decreased. There are some times where that might not be the case, but so you just want to run back through that playbook. Where do I need to rank? What does my ad structure need to be able to rank? The good news for you is that what happened before when you like ran that whole playbook, you were starting from scratch, right? You had no idea what searches perform best for your product. You were really in the testing phase. So I would go back, I would run through that exact playbook. Joseph, if you have any questions on what that playbook looks like, I'm more than happy to get into that as well. But the good news is instead of going out and doing completely new keyword research, what I would do is I would treat your search term reports like your keyword research. I would go back through what campaigns work best, what targets work best, look within your current data set. So good news is you're not 100% starting from scratch as to what typically had worked for your particular product. Bad news is you kind of got to run the playbook again. So that would be how I would approach that. We got another really good question. And Joseph, of course, if you have any follow-up questions, or any of you who are asking questions, if you have any follow-up questions to anything I say or want to add further clarification, that's always welcome. So feel free
Do you mind if I jump in a little bit?
No, go ahead. If you have perspective, go for it.
I'm not just a pretty face looking over here, guys. I got some perspective. So Joseph, another thing that preemptively, making sure to have the listings that are also FBM enabled. So if you have stock that's not just in Amazon FBA warehouses, if you happen to work with a client or you are a client and have a brand that's working and has a 3PL or has the ability to ship themselves, making sure that can, if you happen to run out of inventory, again, that's worst case scenario. We don't want that to happen. But if it does, making sure that that listing is switched over to FBM and making sure that you can still supply that product. Hopefully it's not months. Hopefully it's not weeks or days, worst case scenario. But if that were the case, making sure that you have that backup plan, can pull from other inventory sources if possible. So try to make sure that if there's ones that are typically running out, or if you're constantly running this playbook, hopefully we kind of like proactive next time and can have that capability enabled. So something to think about if you were talking to a client or talking about your own brand there.
Yeah, that's a great call out. And with that sort of a tactic on the ad side again is the product or the SKU. So you have the child list, and then you can have multiple SKUs underneath it, which is what Ryan's talking about, having like an FBA and an FBM SKU. The ads are what's called retail aware, which means you're only ever going to run ads on the SKU that has the buy box. So what you can actually do, and this is what we do with all clients, is if they have an FBM SKU, we'll actually add both the FBA and the FBM into those ads. And then what happens, because it's retail aware, the ads will naturally just automatically turn on whatever the FBM SKU is. So you don't have to be like, oh, I'm running out of stock, go add everything. And you can already do that and be fully confident that it's not going to like screw anything up, because if you don't have the buy box, it's not going to run on those anyways. But good point, right, on the FBM. I appreciate the context there.
Of course.
Yeah, so we got a good one on the toy category, and then I got an interesting one from Sean. I'm going to get to that one that I'm excited about. But
yeah, me too.
Hello, I wanted to know what strategy we can launch for toy category, specifically when targeting low ticket selling price products. Good question. I've got some specific tactics for the toy category, some interesting observations we've seen. I'm talking about like individual strategies for specific products. So the one thing that I would say in the toy category, there's kind of like a couple different ways to slice it, and I would say I would test both, see what works, and then sort of move in that direction. This is kind of a universal strategy, one that works really, really well for any kind of product launches, or if you're trying to figure out, just kind of where to best advertise products. Go after the relevant keywords, meaning, so for example, a toy category, you might have, I'm going to try and think of a toy thing off the top of my head. Let's say we had a sticker book, right? You might search GIF, maybe it's a princess sticker book or something. You could search like, gifts for 5-year-old girl, right? Technically, yeah, is that super relevant? But that doesn't specifically describe the product. What about princess sticker book? Well, that's going to be much more relevant to the product, right? So you're really looking to find that intersection between where you still have good search volume and then where you can get specific to the product. Now, depending on the product, that will sort of determine like how good the search volume will be for your particular product. So sometimes you got to go and branch out a little bit, like it's slightly less relevant, because that's the only way you can get any search volume. That's kind of where I would start. The other thing that's actually really interesting, so this is only in specific categories. We find this to be the case in depends on the clothing, but there is things in like clothing, giftable products, anything where people are searching for that one specific thing. So for example, like say I'm going to go search Mother's Day gift, or Father's Day is coming up, right? Gift for dads. I probably have a very specific idea of what my dad likes, right? I'm going to look at that page. I'm going to see mugs, and I'm going to see maybe fishing gear. I'm like, yeah, he doesn't really care about fishing, so I can just go. So what you'll find is actually those searches where shoppers are more inclined to do a deeper search, because there are certain search pages where if you're not on page 1, like nobody's going to find you. But if there's a more sort of browser type keywords, oftentimes you'll find that even if you rank on page 2, sometimes even page 4, you will get enough search traffic and you will get enough orders to make it sort of worth it. So that's the other, I say kind of like two-part. I would go super specific, and then I would also go try broader. Now, if you're doing broader, be careful because some of those can really, really cost you in terms of like really high cost per clicks there. The name of the game when we're selling low price products, the issue is that, if we're spending $1 cost per click and then we have a 10% conversion rate, so it takes us $10 to convert one order, and then we have like a $10 price point, like you're always going to have 100% A cost there because it costs you $10 to make $10. Like that's not really sustainable. So it's really trying to find where you can offset that 2 ways in advertising. One way is to target the things that have higher conversion rates, meaning it's going to take you less clicks to convert that order. And that's typically where like the super targeted ads come in, like I was telling you about. The other way to offset it is to find the searches that have a lower cost per click, meaning, okay, so I have to get 10 clicks, but I'm going to pay less than $1, and that's also going to help my performance. If you can find the intersection of the two, you can find a place where you have really good conversion rates and you have lower than average cost per clicks. Those are your golden keywords. Go ham. So that's really what you're trying to find in these categories. And like I said, I would go super specific, but I typically don't recommend branching out too broad for the most part, but we have seen this work really well in toys. You just got to be careful about it. I would definitely start it at lower bids. I wouldn't go super aggressive with the giftable keywords. Cool. All right. So Sean has a question here. He says, we have a debate. Let's see if I can set
We
up
love drama.
We have drama. So there's a debate going on in the office. All right. So hopefully I feel flattered. You're coming to me for the answer.
We're the tiebreaker, Elizabeth.
Here we go. He said some folks think that ads are not getting many impressions when inventory levels dip below the stock requirements. Thoughts? Yes.
Yes.
Sales will go down when inventory levels are low. We did a deep dive as well, because the one thing that we noticed is that there definitely is a hit when it comes to the product sales when, again, stock dips below. I actually went and we evaluated the performance, because honestly, sales is a function of 2 things: sessions and your unit session percentage of the conversion rate. So whenever sales dip, that's actually our barometer for saying, like, okay, most times it's like, hey, sales went down. What happened? If you're only looking at sales, you have no idea, right? Well, what you can actually do is look at the trends in the sessions. You can look at the trends of the conversion rates and say, okay, is it that I'm getting less traffic or less of that traffic is converting? And so we went and did an analysis kind of like on the low inventory, trying to piece out like the underlying cause. One of the things that we noticed is that it actually has to do with the dip in conversion rate. And traffic will vary. It really depends on how low the stock really is. But the one thing that you'll find is that as your stock dips in certain areas of the country, they can still purchase the products, but the ship times are a lot farther out because it's coming from, say, East Coast to West Coast or vice versa. So in those cases, somebody would be like, oh, this was super interesting. And somebody who would have been happy to wait, say, 2 days is not happy to wait a week because they can get somebody else's product a lot faster. And so that's kind of been our observation on that.
Sorry, on an organic level too, Sean. Amazon's algorithm is trained not to serve those organic placements as well. So paid placements aside, organically, it doesn't want you to naturally run out of inventory. But once it starts to see that threshold, there will be a throttle of organic traction as well. So if you're looking at paid ads, that's one thing, but also organically, your product won't be as visible because obviously Amazon is throwing relevant keywords, or for the relevant keyword, products that are relevant to the end user. So if your inventory is low, they obviously don't want to start pushing that as much as what they might be doing if you had a higher inventory level. So organically too, you have to think about it as regionally, but organically across the board. Amazon doesn't want you to run out of inventory because they just won't be able to fulfill that order. So ultimately, it has to deal with, your inventory levels too.
Yeah. No, inventory plays into a lot more things than just not being able, hopefully not running out. There's more fluctuations. So
Absolutely.
definitely stock is a difficult thing to forecast and to get right, but it's definitely something worth putting energy into. All right, here's a good question. What is the best strategy for Netherlands electronics category? Our click-through rate is very low. Yeah, Netherlands has very low search traffic. I will say that. We advertise some products in the Netherlands. I actually was now this was a little while ago, so search traffic has increased a little bit, but I was actually talking to some other ad managers I know, and somebody was like, "Is the Netherlands broken?" Because like I don't have any impressions, and I'm like, it's because there's really no search traffic. So one thing I will say is it's kind of a function of just the market that you're in. The other thing is in electronics, and this will vary by region and category and specific product, but it does depend on sort of how many reviews you have. So electronics, people want to make sure that it works, and they're kind of conditioned to like think that potentially things could be kind of potential to break. Electronics are way more technical. It's way more easy for something like to go wrong, and it might not be as sturdy as we want. Things say that they're waterproof and they really aren't. There's just a lot of potential chopper doubt when it comes to electronics. The other thing that influences your click-through rate is going to be your main image. So maybe that's something to evaluate, potentially your main image. And then again, I would look through, another good thing to do is evaluate your click-through rate across all of your targets and then say, where do I get a higher than average click-through rate? And are there clues that I can look at to say, oh, when I appear here, shoppers are more enticed by my product, and that oftentimes can steer you in the correct direction. Other things that increase click-through rate would be where on that search page are you appearing. So if you're appearing top of search, naturally you're going to have a much higher click-through rate. If you're appearing, say, lower on the page 3, 4, 5, you might often have a low click-through rate. So all of those things kind of cumulatively will determine, again, click-through rates.
And Kazi, I think it's Kazi. Kazi, there might be a strategy to look at if you're not just in the Netherlands, if you're in Germany, surrounding countries like that. Look at Amazon's, I want to say it's product search query report. There's an international version of search terms if you have a global listing in different countries. So what I've done in the past for clients is we've done lookalike search terms that are for our top like 20, 25 searches. We've also looked at, is that applicable to every single country? And it's not. So like the top performing ones for like camping blanket, for example, didn't appear in Germany. So you have to look across surrounding countries as well, because there's quite a bit of cross-border search within different countries in Europe specifically. So Germany might be looking in Netherlands and vice versa. So if you have higher campaigns in Germany that you're not applying to Netherlands, take a look at that as well. But there might be some fundamental phrasing in there as well. So just double check with the how it is translated, and also just the just looking at the search functionality. But it is a smaller market compared to like the Germanys over in Europe and the Englands or the United Kingdom. But people are growing that organically. So just take a look at the surrounding countries as well. That might spark some new ideas for creative phrases and campaigns as well.
Definitely. Great input. I appreciate it. Got another one about star ratings. If a product's rating falls below 4 stars and it affects the conversion rates drastically. I swear there was another fall. Oh, here we go. Here's the better question. If a launch product's ratings fall below 4 and it affects the conversion rate drastically, should we reduce the spend until we get good enough ratings to improve conversion rates? Potentially. The problem with ratings is it's kind of a chicken and the egg problem. Like you don't have really good conversion rates, but to get a better star rating, you need the purchases to get the reviews to increase the star ratings. So that's actually a problem when it comes to product launches. Some people like launch without reviews, knowing conversion rates are going to be lower. And then some people, so if you can get the reviews, I know that gets into like against DOS and kind of gray. People call it gray hat tactics. It's kind of black hat, but it's, proceed with caution is what I will say. But so it's really dependent. Do you need those additional sales to help with that review? And maybe you just kind of are aware of the situation and it is what it is. If you don't need those and you're able to pull back, then you can do that as well. The one thing I would caution against, just like a really drastic pullback, is rank is a function of your sales velocity on an individual search page. If that advertising is sort of helping you maintain that ranking, and then you pull back on that advertising, so you decrease in ranking and then also the decrease in conversion rates, you just want to be careful of not just so negatively impacting the sales velocity that you struggle to re-rank the products when you're able to increase that review rating. So again, it would depend on, do you have a way to increase it without the additional ad orders? How much of those ad orders propping up, sort of your rank on those pages? And also, if you are to pull back, how soon can you get those ratings in, right? It's going to take a while. Can you get them quickly? Again, I'm not even going to get into like against DOS terms of service things. Like, do what you think is best for your brand. Also be aware of the risks involved in those kind of things. But that would be my feedback. The other thing I would say is I would not go through and like drastically pause anything, just like, like an on and off, all or nothing strategy. Our typical recommendation, if we're pulling back on anything, the easiest way to do it and the quickest way to do it is going to be leveraging campaign budgets to pull back on ad spend to also like limit the reach. That's going to be the best way to go about that if you want to kind of like a easy dial down way to do it instead of like a quick pause everything. All right, we got a two-part question. I like to run expanded product targeting campaigns that target my own products, single ASIN and ad groups that are the same ASIN. I'm seeing the highest converting products are my own and not much that are my competitors. When running these, should I always negate my products so I know 100% taking sales away from my competitors? It depends. It depends on if you are adamant that that is the strategy of that campaign. So the strategy of the campaign is to completely go for your competition, then 100% negate. My only sort of caution to that or thing to just be aware of is if you don't have much else working in your account, then in those cases, if you get rid of something that's working, which is in a case, sort of like defensive targeting, then something that can hurt the overall performance. If this is sort of like a side campaign you're running, that's not like driving the majority of anything, then you might want to be a little bit cautious with how aggressively you go through and negate. But if the goal is to, get additional placements on other ASINs, 100% I would negate that. All right. Oh, here's another question on sort of geo-targeting. What would be wrong if I can see my product is only in some specific pin codes and not in the other pin codes after searching my brand? Yeah, so I mean, this gets into something called geo-ranking, which is a thing. It's 100% a thing. And there have been tools, and I think there are some tools now that people are saying like, oh, this is this new thing. We track geo-ranking. There was tools 3 years ago that tracked geo-ranking. The thing is that it's really nice to look at. It's nice to know. It's fabulous data, and you can geek out about it all day long. I mean, the tool I tested, gosh, maybe even 4 years ago at this point, had like this whole graph of like where your ranking was in each zip code, and it was fabulous. The thing is, you can stare at that data and you can do jack squat about it. Like, there's no geo-targeting in Amazon advertising yet. They accidentally released something in sponsored display ads, and then we're like, oops, that wasn't supposed to be there, and took it away. We got really excited for a second, and then now so like there is no options. And if you're running, say, like Google advertising or something, there is geo-targeting there. So maybe you can go through. So really, if we had the availability to go after geo-targeting or influence it anyway, again, when we're talking Amazon advertising, you would say like, okay, these are the places where I don't really rank well. And so I'm going to like push my advertising more in those zip codes because I want to, accelerate the sales in those, and kind of in those regions. You can't do that right now. So like, this is the kind of thing with Amazon advertising. I mean, this is like placements, keywords that don't convert. You can either stare at it and drive yourself mad, or you can say it is what it is, and I'm going to optimize based off of like my aggregate performance and control the things that I can control and optimize for the things that I know I can and should be optimizing for. That's my approach to the matter. I geek out. Trust me, I geek out on it as well. It's super interesting. It is a factor. There's just unfortunately nothing you can do about it.
I would also look at social targeting too. Like going back to the social, if you have more clientele who's purchasing within that, weaponize that as part of your social and brand strategy to target Meta or LinkedIn ads or something like that. Wherever you are advertising, utilize that information and keep it. I would save it for a rainy day, so that when Amazon does launch this product capability, eventually, we will never know. We'll know soon enough, maybe. But yeah, just keep that for a rainy day and weaponize the other marketing assets that you have for your brand.
Yeah, no, good point. All right, here's a really interesting question. All right, so they sell in the pet category in India. Is asking, is it true that when we shift to AMS accounts, so like going from Seller Central to Vendor Central, the cost per click is higher in there? Because when we were advertising in Seller Central, the CPC was lower and now it's higher. That is not surprising to me, but it's actually not a factor of the fact that it was a Vendor Central or it was a Seller Central and now it's a Vendor Central account. It's more a factor of the fact that you had well-seasoned historic performance on campaigns in the old structure, and you're pretty much restarting everything. Amazon doesn't correlate. Those two accounts are not linked. So they're not looking at your Seller Central like, oh, we already know that these products work really well on these keywords, so therefore we're going to give preferential treatment to those products. They're not doing that. It is just one of the weird quirks of Amazon advertising that if a campaign has been active for a long time, it just tends to get better performance, better cost per clicks, better impressions and all of that. And so you're just kind of going through like the setup phase again. Remember when you set up, I mean, like, I don't know how long you've been running in Seller Central, but remember like when you set it up and you're like, this isn't great. And you're like doing a bunch of tweaking and like, this doesn't work and this does work. And you're trying to, kind of get things moving. You essentially have to go back through that, unfortunately. So I would say that that's why those things are happening. Again, I don't know if you were here in the beginning, someone asked about what it looks like to re-rank products. Again, I would go back through what's working in your Seller Central and say, okay, I know this has worked in the past. This is what I'm going to try and go through and push in my Vendor Central. So you can kind of take the best of what was happening in Seller Central, put it in Vendor Central. That's 100% how I would do it. Just be aware you're not going to fully replicate performance. And in fact, it might take you a month or so to really get things churning to where they were again.
Elizabeth, there's nothing that an Amazon ad or representative can help with that data correlation, is there? There's nothing that.
No, because there's no links or associating. It's a completely separate.
It's a different listing.
It's a different account. I mean, you can have the same listing. It will be the same listing, but it's a different ad account. Completely separate entities, unfortunately. That would be a lot easier if it was. I mean, we advertise like brands who have a Seller Central and a Vendor Central account, and oftentimes because it's like old school setup, into their Vendor Central account they'll be running like the sponsored display and sponsored brand ads, and then in the Seller Central they're running sponsored product ads, and you're like, man, I wish you could just like combine these two because it'd be so much easier. Like I wouldn't have to have separate reports and separate logins and all of these things. but because they're working in the original, we just have to kind of balance that dichotomy, unfortunately. Yeah. And then unfortunately, when you're switching over from Seller Central to Vendor Central, you can't, like if you were doing Vendor to Seller Central, you can technically run it in Vendor, but it doesn't work the other way because Seller Central is retail aware, which means you're technically not going to be selling or have the buy box in your Seller Central account, which is going to screw up things and essentially just pause all your ads. So
Is there a good time? Is there a good time to make the switch? If someone's like thinking about this, I'm not sure if this brand made the switch already, but is there a time that's best served for them to do it? Or obviously not during peak season. That would be probably a really terrible idea.
Yeah, I mean, there's not really any. You kind of just gotta bite the bullet
Recommend it.
on this thing.
Yep.
I would, mirroring your point, that would have been my answer though. Like if you have like your peak shopping season that's coming up, it's like any other thing. Like I wouldn't completely change strategies or switch anything if
Sure.
you're during like, if you got to make it or break it month, don't do it then. Wait till after and then switch. All right. There's another one on launches. For launches, if the conversion rate of is your main KPI at launch, how long would you stay in that launch phase? Good question. With high conversion rates in mind until you start optimizing for ACoS, total ACoS, ROAS goal, no budget constraints. So I wouldn't necessarily have no budget constraints in the beginning. Budget constraints are actually really, really important. And something that a lot of brands do not, honestly, one of my pet peeves with most information out there when it comes to ranking strategies. I mean, you can go on YouTube today. It looks like you're listening in on YouTube. So you can go into YouTube, you can type Amazon PPC launch strategies. You're going to come up with a dozen, honestly, really good videos that are going to say, all right, this is how you do the keyword research, and this is how you go about, launching the campaigns, and you need this amount of keywords, and you need this many campaigns, and you need these 5 ad types, and whatever. I've talked to sellers who have run those strategies with no constraints of budget, right? They're like, that's what the YouTube video told me to do. So then they launch the campaigns and they go on the next day and they're like, oh my gosh, I just spent $500 in a day and my budget for my entire month was $500. Like, and then they freak out and they feel like they're a failure and they feel like they did something wrong. You didn't do anything wrong. You just didn't have a strategy that was customized based on your goals and what you can afford. So obviously with launching with a lower budget, you have to set expectations that you're not going to have like sort of this aggressive, millions of orders right out of the gate, but you're also not going to have to spend as much. So really what we do is we are so adamant about taking into account goals when we're building out a product launch. Now they don't have to be like really hard set goals, as in like, oh, I can only spend like $50 a day, $100 a day. Some of our clients have like very specific spend budgets. Other of our clients is like, hey, I want to get to 20 orders a day. What does that look like in terms of budget? We can kind of forecast that out. Or if they say like, hey, I'm kind of okay with like, a couple $100 a day. I want you guys to be more conservative. We know what we're doing at this point. So we can kind of like help them understand and like sort of craft, kind of an in-between budget. But that's actually the thing that I would look at. So when you're saying like there's no budget constraints, figure out your budget constraints beforehand. And so if you say like, okay, I don't have budget constraints up to $200. I'm spending $200 a day. Okay, great. Now you're not going to like blow past that. If I have a $200 a day budget and I'm running at like $1,000 a day and I'm like, well, hopefully this is eventually going to come back to me in sales. And then you end up going out of budget or going out of business because you don't have cash flow. Like cash flow is king in these businesses. You need money for reorders. So I would go through and do that. Now, when we start optimizing, it's dependent on the data. And when I say data, I mean amount of clicks. So if I have a particular product, say I'm launching in maybe like the home goods category, I roughly can tell that, a conversion rate in the home goods category should be roughly 10%, right? That means 10 clicks on average to convert to an order. If I get 50 clicks on something, Do you think I can reasonably make a decision that that's not probably going to work for me? 50 clicks, I honestly wouldn't let it get up to 50 clicks, but 50 clicks is a 2% conversion rate. If I'm expecting 10% conversion rate and I'm staring down at something that has a 2%, even lower than a 2% conversion rate because it hasn't converted yet, I think I can reasonably make the decision to like pull back. So that's what we'll start doing is we're going, okay, we do intense keyword research. We curate our keyword research based on our available budget. So if I have a lower budget, I'm not going to be like, hey, let me target the 100,000 search volume keyword. I don't have the budget for it yet. Let's go a little bit leaner. We set expectations on order volume based on what we're able to spend, coordinate that with our brand. And then we launch it and we go, okay, what in this limited structure worked? You are optimizing conversion rates, but more importantly, you're actually optimizing for orders. Where am I getting orders? Where are the sales coming from? And I'm going, okay, that's where the sales are. Then I start increasing bids and budgets. I go, hey, that's where a ton of clicks happen. I don't have any orders. Got to decrease it. So you are optimizing off of conversion rates. But in essence, I would take it a step further and optimize just for sales velocity, because sales velocity is how you rank products. And in the name of the game on launches, that's what you're trying to do, rank products. And then I would say when we would optimize that is the first 3 days. Our goal is we need impressions, right? So we're typically going, okay, where do we not have impressions? Let's increase the bids. And then after those first 3 days, ideally in day one, we get some inkling as to where those orders are coming from. And then as soon as we're starting to get the volume of clicks that we can say this works, this doesn't, then we're optimizing based off of that. Because kind of the worst thing you can do on launch is just continuously throw ad budget at something that like has enough clicks to validate it doesn't work for you. But you're like, I really wish I could convert here. This should work. If the data is telling you it's not working, make the optimization. I wouldn't wait. We'll got a couple more.
This is a follow-up from earlier, Elizabeth. What we heard.
Yes. This is the expanded targeting question. My plan is to run an identical campaign that is just negating my products. I wouldn't touch the original campaign since performance is greater than that. Perfect strategy. Perfect strategy. I 110% agree with this. So the context on the strategy actually kind of goes back to the thing that I said before, as if a campaign is running, it's really hard. Even if you completely duplicate that campaign, you won't be able to really always replicate the performance. So what he's saying is, hey, this thing's working really great. I want to change the strategy, but I don't want to get rid of that good performance. So what he's going to do is create another campaign with that edited strategy so we can keep the good stuff and have the additional strategy as well. And I would 100% agree with that. That works with kind of how we know Amazon ads perform. So
you get the Ask Junglr stamp of approval, Jaleel.
Yes, great strategy. Definitely agree with you on that one. All right, Jimmy, how's the question? Can you share your thoughts on day parting? Oh, interesting. We're currently using a third-party automation tool, and it's set up to make bid optimizations decrease and increase several times throughout the day. This is a really good question. Yes, we use day parting. Two things I would say. If you're using a third-party optimization tool, you probably have data for this, but 100% base your optimizations and your day parting on data. Don't be like, I think I don't convert on weekends. Look at your conversion rates. The main thing that we look at is the conversion rates of the product. And then what you want to do is you want to set up your day parting rules. You want to check your performance. Your performance is going to include things like total ACoS and total sales. Like, am I actually improving the performance, or am I just shutting off my ads on times people weren't converting, but maybe they were clicking and browsing and then purchasing later? That can happen, and that's not really anything you can sort of read in the data. But providing you're basing it off of, again, conversion rate performance, and providing you're watching your statistics and making sure it absolutely is working for you. So again, you can go back and tweak. That can work really, really well. The one thing we have found and things that we sort of prefer is actually to either pause or unpause campaigns. There's two ways of doing it, right? You can pause or unpause campaigns, or you can put bids higher or lower. We kind of prefer the pausing and unpausing of campaigns. We kind of found that to work best in certain scenarios, because the thing with bids is you're actually changing where you're appearing on those search pages, which can work, might not always work, but I have nothing against increasing or decreasing bids. Again, just make sure you're basing your decisions on data and then watching data to validate if what you're doing is in fact working. The other thing I will say for those of you listening in, do not look to day parting as a solution for a poor converting product. I have run up against brands and consulted with brands where they're like, oh, you know, this the ACoS is really high, the spend is really high, so day parting is going to fix it. Day parting is an added tweak and optimization to something that should already be performing. It's not the end all be all holy grail of fixes if your product just isn't converting well. I do want to put that preface, sort of that like warning sticker on day parting strategies. They're great to test. Just don't feel like it's going to save you from like ad spend that's not optimized.
Enhancement, not a full-on strategy.
Yeah, great way to put it. It's definitely an enhancement on top. And if the underlying campaigns are not fully optimized, it's the extra step. Not a bad extra step, but again, it's not going to fix a poor underlying strategy. It looks like I said part 2, although I don't see the part 2 coming in. If you have hit a threshold on gaining brand share on a keyword, no amount of increasing bids or budgets or converting all ad placements is working, what do you do next to increase the brand share? All right. Here's the part 2. Similar situation, but you have multiple products relevant for the same keyword. How do you make sure all products are getting equal visibility on the keyword? All right, so let's do the part 1, and then I'll answer the part 2. Gaining more market share, it really goes back to 2 ways you can do this. One, you can target additional keywords, which is really kind of what you're looking to do. Target long tail variations of the keyword, all the above. Another strategy you can use is actually to target all of the products that are also ranked highly on those search pages. It's another great way to gain visibility for all the products that are getting clicks. You can do this by using sponsored product ads and sponsored display ads and a sponsored brand ad if you want to get a little bit snazzy with it. So we often have like competitors that were like, oh, we want to target all the things, use all the ad types, target the heck out of those. Again, how much you target is going to depend on how much ad budget you have, right? You don't want to just completely blow out ad spend and then just infinitely increase total ACoS numbers and make the product unprofitable. So I do it in layers. But if you want to like an advancement strategy, long tail variations, sometimes an interesting strategy for this is to put that root word, that main keyword, in a broad match, keep bids lower so you don't blow up the ad spend again. And then just allow that to target all of your, sort of long tail variations or potentially a phrase match. Just single word, lower bids, see if that can also gain additional long tail variations of that. Finding additional keywords, additional search pages that you haven't targeted. Great way to do this. Reverse ASIN search your product. Filter out for pages that you don't have rank on, especially pages you don't have rank on and you have no ad placements on. Those are really good prime ones to increase market share. And then, again, targeting all the competitors who are ranked highly on those search pages is another great way to just gain more visibility. It's kind of like a half step away from keyword targeting, but there is a lot of search that goes on from product pages. So if you're only ever targeting keywords and you're not paying attention to like product page placements, you're actually missing out on a huge volume of searches. So that's another great way to go about that. And then the second question is, you have multiple products relevant for the same keyword. How do you make sure all products get equal visibility on the keyword? They won't. They never will. because somebody has to be in spot 1 and somebody has to be in spot 2. The way that we also, if you listen to the guys at Simple Modern, they have a phenomenal brand and a ton of products that are relevant for the same search. And the one thing that they've seen is even if their products have a stellar conversion rate, Amazon will only allow them to dominate so much of the search page. Like Amazon's not interested if you go search like a generic keyword, say like running shoe, it's never going to 100% be Nike, even if all of the brands, their conversion rate dropped in half tomorrow. Amazon's like, I want to showcase more than just one type of product. So do keep aware, do be aware of that. The other thing is that each product is going to have its own performance on that search page. So I'll let you know how we do it, which is a more scalable way to do it and a way that optimizes for performance and data, which is going to be, one, don't be afraid of overlap. Oh, I'm targeting the same keyword, and like so many brands I know overthink this. So like, okay, so if I want this one to be top and I want this one to be like the second spot, then I have to like coordinate, like what's the bid for the breathe and optimize for performance. That will naturally help you increase the things that have the best performance on them, and you're going to lower down the ad spend for the things that don't perform as well. So you can 110% optimize for total A cost and A cost of that individual product. Again, that's going to naturally allow you to have the products settle where they need to be. You don't have to overthink it. It's going to get you to the same place without you having to like overthink it and stress out about it. So that's what I would say is there's only so much visibility you're going to be able to get for each individual product, and then optimize for individual product performance. Don't worry about overlap, because you will not bid against yourself in the ad auction, providing the products are advertised from within the same account. So you're totally good there.
That would be awful if that happened.
Oh my gosh. No.
Don't bid against yourself, everyone. Use the same accounts.
Which, here's the factor, is if you have two separate accounts, meaning two separate logins, and you have the same product being advertised in this one and like a very relevant, you will bid against yourself in that case.
That's a good point.
So that's something to be aware of as well. But providing you're within the same ad account, you're totally good. Because it's not within Amazon's best interest to screw over their sellers. Sometimes we feel like we're getting screwed over, but they try.
Conversation for another day, Elizabeth.
Yeah, there you go. All right, a couple more. I think we have time to get to all of these. Jamie has a good question. Would it be over-optimizing if a bid changes were made several times per day? I was just used to doing bid optimization manually or pausing and unpausing day parting rules and finding a sweet spot on bids.
I'm assuming price or just the optimization.
It looks like bids being changed several times a day.
Okay, not price being changed of the product.
Yes. Yeah, product changes, that would be a lot. Oftentimes, yes. Jamie, what I will say is it is dependent on the how many clicks you're getting for that keyword. So if I said I'm changing all bids across my entire account several times a day, 100% you're over optimizing. If you get a one keyword that has a ton of click volume on it, the thing is that your optimizations need to take into account what the current performance is. Okay, I'll say this. In every account that I've audited where there's a software that optimizes multiple times a day, one, when I'm looking at the optimizations that are made, they really don't make sense. And performance just has been a little bit fluctuation. We are using KPOC to optimize bids on some accounts, and that is a daily update. But with any updates, you definitely want to be taking into account historical data as well as current data. So that's the thing to be aware of. You don't want to be like, oh, I didn't get orders within the last hour, so therefore I'm optimizing down. Anything that does that is going to be, I would say, the potential for over optimizing if you're making several times a day is it's way more easy to over optimize in these cases than to be making good decisions. So if I had a preference, I would say max once a day would be my recommendation. There's very limited cases in which you want to optimize more than that. We do have a case where we optimize twice a day, and that is for highly seasonal products, but that's a very intentional and very advanced strategy, is what I would say. So you got to know what you're doing. All right, Mohammed, what do you do if the product is $6 to $7 with a 7 to 80 cent bids? Two things you could do. One, see if you can find keywords that have a lower than 70 to 80 cent bid. And then the second thing you can do is find ways where the conversion rate is really, really high. And then the third thing that we typically do is instead of optimizing strictly for ACoS, because there's only so low you're going to be able to get the ACoS, it's not because you're doing anything wrong. It's a function of how high the cost per clicks are and how low the product price is.
This must be a very high search volume that you're trying to get,
that would
Mohammed, because that's a very high bid for a $6 to $7 product. The financials on that don't make sense. So, like Elizabeth said, certainly find something where you can win and have much lower bids than that. That's extremely high.
Yeah, because you're looking at
for that margin, it's 10% of your sale. That's tough.
Yeah, even if you wanted to get at that cost per click, even if you wanted to get a 50% ACoS, you have to have a 25% conversion rate or higher, because you need 5 clicks on average or less. So if you can find things, that's where the conversion rate comes in. Like if you can find things that have a 25% conversion rate, fantastic. It depends on the product, what you're targeting, all of that. So that's the thing that you're looking about. The third thing I would say is you can zoom out. Now, actually, if this is a repeat purchase product, this will work. Which one? If you have a repeat purchase product, if you can get subscribe and save on that sucker, do it 110%. But what you can actually do is optimize for total ACoS, because if you have repeat purchases and you have like a higher accumulation of total sales coming in, and then that sales, even if your ACoS is super high, it's actually entirely possible. Now, it depends on the ratio of how many ad sales you have and then how many total sales, like what's the delta between those two. But providing that your you have a lot more total sales than what your ad spend is, 100% possible to have like 100% ACoS and a 15% total ACoS.
So this would be like a repeat, like a refill of something, potentially like Razorhead, something like that. That makes sense.
Yeah, which is, I mean, so it's a little bit foreign concept to Amazon sellers because it's not as common. But if you go out into like the typical, or even, so take into account our business, we're an agency, right? Okay, how much they talk about customer lifetime value and customer acquisition costs, right? So if how many purchases you get stacks up, maybe they purchase 20 of these over the course of a year or something with you. Well, maybe it costs you $8 to get that first purchase, but then you're going to get those extra 20 or 5 or however much that is. So like it technically you lost on the first sale, but you made up for it with more sales. There are ways to look at that. So again, I don't know if this was a repeat purchase. Typically speaking, low price items are most of the time repeat purchases.
Or refills or some sort of add-on feature. Again, another strategy would be looking at the cost of your goods. Like if this is a notebook, again, $8 makes a lot of sense. But I would maybe even look into bundling this product. If it's a one-off, do more bundles and then start selling bundles in that capacity too. So any way you can optimize what you're already purchasing and selling and adding more of a value so that people can either for repeat purchases or just to kind of stand apart from other competitors. That would be my guess. But those margins seem very tight right now, according to just what we have in front of us, right? So without knowing anything else, that would be a good guess.
No, definitely. All right, we got one last question from Jimmy. Jimmy, we'll get in your question, and then I think we're gonna wrap it up because we're pretty much at time now. But Jimmy's question is that I'm struggling with creating campaigns for my listing with many variations. What is your advice on this topic? Thanks. Absolutely. So if you were not aware, we manage ads for several large clothing brands. Feels like we're getting more of the clothing brands. I'm like, it's such a pain to manage. There's so many variations. It's ridiculous. That being said, that means we know what the heck we're doing when it comes to variations. And so I actually have a video on this topic that goes way more in depth. Looks like you're watching on YouTube, Jimmy. So I would recommend going how to increase sales, the best variation ad strategy. You see this advertising variations. Maybe I will share this in the chat so you can get this as well. But I will give you the short and condensed version. And then I definitely recommend you watch that video because it's going to go way more in depth. Two-pronged approach to this. And it depends on if you have any data or not for the products. If you know which ones are your best performers, then what you want to do is anything that is, quote, generic, meaning not specifically describing. So my classic example is always water bottle. So like women's water bottle, right? I can maybe infer, honestly, with women's, I can be like, well, maybe they want the pink or the purple ones, and maybe they don't really like the bright orange ones as much. I don't know. But basically, if I just said like metal water bottle, I don't know who wants that. If I have a bunch of different colors or sizes, I don't know. Versus pink women's 40-ounce tumbler. That's super specific. If I have a smaller variation, I have a 40-ounce, and then I also have a pink one, I'm like, oh, that search goes to the pink 40-ounce one. Okay, that makes sense. So what we do is we do our keyword research, and then we sort of like bucket it based on shopper intent specific to the variations. We've done this in clothing. We've done this in home goods. We've done this in bedding. It actually works great. Go figure. The main image is exactly the same, but if you take the queen size sheets and you put them in campaigns with all the queen size search keywords, conversion rates are great. So this will work well with the variation. So bonus points, because your ranking is determined by your sales velocity for that entire listing. Depends on the category. But if you can actually find searches that are specific to the different variations, you're essentially tapping into additional markets and then having all of that search traffic and those sales be funneled into the parent listing, which basically in some cases, it depends, can act like a rocket ship for the overall ranking. Now, when I'm going to get outside of the scope in a little bit. I'm going to talk about variation launches. A lot of people will go about variation launches and be like, oh, I think this sounds like a good idea, but they haven't actually vetted it. Pro tip here. If you're thinking about launching variations, if you can go through and find potential search traffic for a variation of your product that you're not currently selling, and so you can kind of tap into that additional market, that's why you'll actually hear some people be like, oh, I launched a variation and oh my gosh, my sales doubled, it's insane. And then some people will launch variations and they're like, I don't know, I got like a 5-10% boost, it wasn't that much. It depends on, is there a market for that product that you are not serving? If the answer is yes, the potential for increase, if you add that variation, in some cases exponential. If there's not much and you're like, I think this sounds like a good idea, and you haven't vetted it, it could be beneficial. You know, it could convert better and help, but you're not tapping into additional like sales stream that you weren't able to target before. So that's kind of like the overall idea of how you would build that. So if you have the data to know which one's your best performing variation, then it would just advertise the best performers in those, you know, kind of quote generic campaigns that I talked about. If you don't have the data for it and it's completely on launch, then what we do is we will group all of the products. Now, I wouldn't group products if they were on separate listings. You want their own campaigns for that. But I would group the products if they're all on one parent ASIN and then advertise all of them. And then what you want to do is you want to go back and evaluate once you start getting clicks on the products and be like, that one doesn't work. And then you pause the ones that aren't working. Not working meaning a lot of clicks and no orders. And then that will help you sort of get to what performs best. And then eventually everything performs, you know, you're advertising the best performers, and that's how we go about that. Again, I know I talked a lot about strategy in this video, so that should give you some good ideas. I still recommend you watch that other video because I have a couple other pro tips in there, which you might find helpful. So anyways, with that, we are at time, and I appreciate everyone's questions. It's been awesome. Jamie saying thanks for your opinion. Definitely take it into consideration. Yeah, absolutely. I hope it helps. So for all of you listening in, I appreciate it. If you're listening to the replay, thank you so much. And we look forward to seeing you same time, same place next week. Make sure you come with your Amazon ad questions and we'll get you answers.